For number 10, let's look at it being a holy day. Almost every bride, of course, feels like a princess on her wedding day, and especially walking down the aisle, right? And Jewish weddings, though, it's considered to be a very sacred event and a Yom Kippur for the bride and the groom. It means that the day is like the Day of Atonement and the Day of Forgiveness, okay? Also, previous sins of the bride and groom are forgiven, and they take vows that connect their soul. So yeah, that's an interesting thing to incorporate in the wedding tradition. Next up at number 9, we have the Shabbat Kala. It's an event in which those close to the bride, like her friends and her family and people from the community, they throw an event for the bride. Now, this is an all-girls party, so no guys are allowed there, sort of like a bachelorette party. Now, the event of the Shabbat Kala is held on the Saturday before the wedding. But the Shabbat Kala is more than just an excuse for Jewish girls to go and party. It's a purposeful event where all the close people are there for the bride to make sure that she feels love and to ease her nerves before her big wedding day. For the tradition at number 8, let's look at Yom Kippur. Now, I mentioned a bit of this earlier, but I want to add to this point. Some Jews actually fast on their wedding day. Now, why do they do this? Well, like I mentioned, the wedding is considered a day of forgiveness, and as such, some couples choose to fast the day of their wedding, just as they do on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The couple's fast will last until the first meal together after the wedding ceremony. The tradition of chuppah comes in at number 7. Jewish weddings are held under special canopies called chuppah. And now they're held up by 4 poles and have a roof, and it is the first roof that is shared by the couple. Its structure reflects and pays tribute to the open tent that the biblical figures Abraham and Sarah shared. Their home was never closed to the community, and they greeted all of their guests openly and hospitably. The wedding ceremony of Jews begins when the groom enters the chuppah. Now, in most weddings, the bride circles 7 times around her husband before joining him, which represents that she is making walls for their future life. At number 6, let's look at the tradition of Badikin. Normally, we have seen that the groom unveils his bride, but the opposite happens in many Jewish weddings. The groom veils his bride, actually, and this veiling takes place in the Badikin ceremony. And it's an important part of the wedding. The bride tried her best to look beautiful and stunning on her big day, so why veil the face? Well, let me explain. The veil is worn because no matter how beautiful the bride appears, beauty is fleeting, and it's the quality of a person's character and spirit that truly matters. The veil represents that now the groom is ready to protect, clothe, and provide for his wife. Now, halfway in at number 5, we have the tradition of plain rings. The bride receives a ring from the groom, and it's not necessary that the item has to be a ring though, but normally it is a ring for tradition's sake. The ring must be plain though, made of gold and without any sort of ornaments or extra fixings on it, none of that stuff. The simplicity of the ring symbolizes that the wedding is also uncomplicated and simple. The groom does not always receive a ring at this point though, but the bride has to give him a ring, and she must wait until they have left the chuppah to do so. All the events must be carried out according to the teachings of the Torah. So Jews, they try to keep that at the forefront when they're practicing and doing their wedding traditions. Number 4 leads us to a tradition known as Tinaim. Now, it's a document that has to be signed to declare the official engagement of the bride and the groom. So even if the man proposes to his woman and he puts a ring on her finger, well, doesn't mean they're engaged. They're not officially engaged at all. They have to sign the Tinaim. Now, next up, the ketubah is another contract that is signed, and the groom signs this contract to make sure that from now on, he'll be responsible to fulfill the emotional as well as the physical needs of his wife. He'll be responsible to provide food and shelter to his wife and to make sure that the wife is fulfilling his vows, the wives do have access to this contract. And it is a necessary part of the Jewish wedding because the wedding cannot take place until it is signed. People usually handwrite and decorate these contracts. Number 2 brings us a very interesting tradition though, stepping on glass. At the end of the ceremony, the groom is invited to go and step on some glass. With his shoes on, of course. Imagine barefoot stepping on glass. Nah. So not only is this a fun way to end the wedding ceremony, but it also is extremely symbolic in Jewish weddings. It recalls the destruction of the Jerusalem temple and reminds the newlyweds and all of their guests of this event, even at their happiest hour. To end this episode off at number 1, we have the tradition of Yichud. After the ceremony, the couple is taken to a private room called Yichud for some quiet time. Yichud means alone together, and no one is allowed to disturb the couple at this point. The couple is allowed to break their fast in Yichud and have some alone time after the hectic day. Now, I do have to say though that there is a big misconception that the couple consummates their wedding, marriage through sexual intimacy in the Yichud. Well, of course, it happens, right? After all, we're talking about newlyweds here, but it's not necessarily happening during that time. The couple may choose to do it after. But in biblical times, the Yichud was when the marriage would be consummated. Starting at number 10, the tradition of no specific officiator for the wedding. So marriage traditions differ depending on the culture as well as the Islamic branch. And in Islam, there is no specific clergy who are designated to officiate weddings. So any Muslim who understands Islamic tradition really well and is a practicing Muslim can officiate a wedding. There are also many people that use marriage officers called ma'zun. And if a Muslim wedding ceremony takes place in a mosque, you'll need to take off your shoes for sure before you enter into the mosque. So yeah, just a few things to keep in mind, but no, there's no specific clergy that is like, yes, that person and only that person can officiate a wedding. The tradition at number 9 is Mahr. The marriage contract includes a Mahr, which is a formal statement that specifies a certain amount of money that the groom is going to give to the bride. And the Mahr actually specifies 2 components. Now, the first component is that there is a certain amount of money that's to be owed before the marriage is consummated. And then there is a second deferred amount that's given to the bride throughout her lifetime. However, nowadays though, you're going to find that many couples actually just use wedding rings as the first payment of Mahr, and then the deferred amount can come in the form of a little sum of money or some sort of gift. Another interesting tradition in the religion of Islam is separating genders at a wedding. Gender separation at weddings is pretty common when it comes to Muslim tradition, and not every Muslim though will choose to separate the genders at their wedding, but more traditional ceremonies, they're actually going to keep the men separate from the women. And during the reception, you'll see men and women celebrating in different rooms, or the rooms are divided up by a partition, or even some cases, men and women just sit at different tables. Walima is the next tradition at number 7. This is the wedding feast. After the wedding contract is signed, the feast that follows is called the walima. And in some Muslim cultures, the walima can last for multiple days. One thing to keep in mind though, when you're feasting and having fun at a wedding, the consumption of alcohol is forbidden in the religion of Islam, so you typically won't find any open bars at a wedding, or you won't see any guests giving toasts with champagne in their hand at a traditional Muslim wedding. Nikah comes in at number 6. So the marriage contract is signed in a nikah ceremony where the groom or a representative of the groom actually proposes to the bride in front of at least 2 witnesses. And in Islamic law, marriage, or specifically the marriage contract, is referred to as nikah. And the bride and the groom during this time repeat the word kabul, which means I accept in Arabic, 3 times. And then the marriage contract is then signed. And if men or women are separated for the ceremony, there's going to be a male representative called a wali that acts on the bride's behalf during the nikah. All right, let's get back to this episode. We have tradition number 5, and that is the vows and blessings. So sometimes following the nikah, there may be other traditions included into the ceremony, like the recitation of Fatiha, which is the first chapter of the Quran. And now in many cases, Muslim couples do not say their vows, but there's a wedding officiator that generally speaks about the importance of marriage and things like that. But yes, at some Muslim weddings, the bride and the groom, they do say their vows, and a common format that they follow is this. So the bride would say, I, the bride's name, offer you myself in marriage in accordance with the instructions of the Holy Quran and the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. I pledge in honesty and with sincerity to be for you an obedient and faithful wife. And then the groom would say, I pledge in honesty and sincerity to be for you a faithful and helpful husband. Number 4 brings us the Zafa tradition. The Zafa is a newlywed couple's grand epic entrance to their wedding reception. You'll typically find this at a Muslim Arab wedding, and it typically starts off with the bride's father walking his daughter to her groom, and it's then followed by a little parade of drummers and musicians playing Arabic music. And during the Zafa, the rings are moved from the right hand to the left hand. And that leads us to tradition number 3, the final farewell. This tradition is all about the bride and the groom leaving their wedding. So when they're driving out in their vehicle, it's usually a decorated vehicle, friends and family members, they go and follow that vehicle in their own vehicles, where they can be heard playing loud music and honking, you know, just to let the whole world know that, hey guys, these people just got married, so let's make a lot of noise in the streets. Tradition number 2 is arranged marriage. So Muslim marriages are sometimes arranged by the parents. It still happens, yes. Although divorce is allowed in certain circumstances, the ideal is to actually find a partner that you're not going to divorce. So yes, the parents do what they can to make sure that they find suitable partners for their children. And just to make it clear, it is forbidden in the religion of Islam for parents as well as others to force or try to trick people into getting married to somebody for whatever reason. And although many marriages can be arranged, it has to be with the two parties willingly consenting to get married. A Muslim male and a Muslim female are both expected to be virgins at the time of their first marriage. Of course, if they remarry, that's not necessarily a requirement because they were married before and that marriage would have been consummated. The tradition number 1 in this episode is signing on behalf of the bride. So in Islam, not every person consummates their marriage physically right away. Like for instance, sometimes the bride is very young, so it's considered to be a lot more suitable just to wait until she's a bit older to consummate the marriage. And sometimes the couple may not even be able to live together for whatever reason, so of course, it can't be consummated. But a wedding contract though may be put together and signed and witnessed without the bride actually being there in person. And this can be done, like I mentioned, if the bride doesn't plan to live with her spouse right away. Almost like you're married, but like you're in that limbo phase. You're kind of just waiting to finalize the marriage, but on paper and in front of witnesses and in front of Allah, you're married. At number 10, we have the tradition of Tolbi. Now, Tolbi or Tulba is a private event in which only the closest relatives of the bride and the groom are present. Now, the groom formally asks for the bride's hand from her parents. This tradition takes place after both families have agreed to the marriage proposal. Both families give their blessings to the groom and the bride, and the Surah Fatiha is recited. And this is recited by everybody that's present at the event. After that, tea is served with sweets to enjoy and celebrate this whole new agreement, this marriage agreement. Number 9, we have engagement. Now, engagement is also known as khutbah in the Middle Eastern countries, and it's a ceremony in which the bride and the groom, they exchange the rings. So putting the rings on each other's right hands is a very common thing to do. Bride and groom also wear matching color clothing as well. The engagement is pretty much just like a wedding party or dinner party, which is arranged by both parties. Now, moving on to number 8, we have Radwa. Radwa is a small event which takes place 1 or 2 days before the actual wedding. In this small event, male relatives from both families, they go into the bride's home and take care of anything that needs to be done in terms of decorating and setting things up and all of that. And they also make sure that the bride's parents have a great time in this ceremony. The groom's relatives, they make sure to resolve any issue before the wedding, and the eldest man from the groom's side congratulates everyone and gives his blessings. Another cool tradition is the tradition of henna. I love these things. Henna is probably the most common wedding tradition in the Middle Eastern and Arab countries. The bride's female friends sing Arabic songs and they draw henna on the bride's hands and feet, sometimes other parts of the body as well. There's even a henna night. Henna night is just like a bachelorette party for just the females. The friends and family, they dance and sing songs about the bride's new future. They have drinks and food as well, of course. Men also have their own separate party where they typically do things like dancing to traditional music. Khatb al-Kitab is the tradition next. This is another Middle Eastern marriage tradition. It is a wedding ceremony in which both families sign the marriage documents. The sheikh or the ma'zun lays out the conditions and the rules of the marriage. And specifically in Coptic Orthodox Christianity, as well as in the Ethiopian Tewahedo Church, brides and grooms are dressed up in royal garments, sometimes wearing capes and crowns and jewelry even. The couple are each given a candle to hold in their left hand during the ceremony. And this represents their beliefs in Jesus Christ as the light of the world, and that they will be guided through life by the teachings of the church. The couple's right hands are then joined by the priest as a symbol of unification. Zaffa comes in next at number 5. Zaffa is a traditional dance that is performed in weddings in Middle Eastern countries, especially in the country of Lebanon. It's like a grand entrance celebration for the newlywed couple. Now, the tradition starts with the bride's father bringing his daughter to the groom. And during this whole event, the band of drummers, they play traditional Arabic music. And in some traditions, actually, the rings are changed to the opposite hand. You'll hear female relatives performing zagruta. Also, traditionally, male and female dancers, they perform a special dance wearing special clothing to welcome in the couple. And also, this is a pretty popular thing, so much so that it was recently adopted by Beirut as well. In some weddings, the Zaffa performers will carry the bride on their shoulders and bring them to the event. Let's look at Dabki at number 4. Dabki is a folk dance performed by professional dancers in some Arab weddings. Wedding guests also join the dance and dance in a circle. However, one thing to know is that in Egypt, instead of Dabki, belly dancing is done to entertain the guests. For number 3, we have Barmet al-Arus. This is a farewell that's given to the bride and groom before they leave. Now, the couple goes into a beautiful decorated vehicle, and the relatives and the friends, they follow the couple to their home and play loud music to let everybody know that this couple just got married. They're making a whole lot of noise up in the streets. Let's move on now to number 2, and this is Moroccan kaftan. Moroccan weddings are among the most traditional in the region. During the ceremony, which can last from 3 days to a week, depending on the financial situation of the couple, and it also depends on the region that the wedding is happening in. But the bride wears her best kaftans in the form of a coat or overdress, usually reaching to the ankles and with long sleeves. And finally, number 1, we have Egypt's honeymoon. Honeymoons in Egypt differs from one part of the country to another. When we look at the countryside in Egypt, the newlywed couples, they rarely travel for their honeymoon. Instead, they stay home for the first 7 days of their marriage before entertaining friends and families who come to see them, bring them gifts and food, as well as anything else that they might need. But when you look over into the urban parts of Egypt, married couples, they commonly spend the first night of their honeymoon in a hotel, and that's where they celebrate their union before they travel to a resort. It could be overseas, or it could be a local resort, like traveling to the Red Sea, for instance.
First up on the list is the holy month of Ramadan. Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, observed by Muslims worldwide as a month of fasting, prayer, reflection, and community. Although it may not surprise you to know that during this month, Muslims abstain from food and water from sunrise to sunset. Considering this month is about fasting, it may surprise you to know that this holy month doesn't just mean refraining from food and drinks. During Ramadan, Muslims are encouraged to abstain from backbiting, using bad or crude language, lying and cheating, and partaking in arguments and violence. The Prophet Muhammad is believed to have said, "Whoever does not give up forced speech and evil actions, Allah is not in need of his leaving his food and drink." Another surprising Islamic tradition is that charity is a big deal, for real. There are two main forms of charity in Islam: Zakah, which is an obligatory charity, and Sadaqah, which is a recommended charity. The rules concerning Zakah provide that 2.5% of one's income and net assets should be given directly to the charity on a yearly basis if one meets the threshold. Ramadan sees record levels of additional donations. It is estimated that Muslims across the UK donate approximately £100 million every year over this 1 month period. On the note of Ramadan, Taraweeh is something that is quite significant in the religion of Islam, more particularly during the month of Ramadan. Taraweeh are prayers that are performed by Muslims at night after the Isha prayer only during the holy month. It can be prayed with at least 8 rak'ats according to the Hanafi and Shafi'i schools of Sunni Islam. However, the standard number of rak'ats is usually 20. For clarification purposes, if you guys are confused by what a rak'ah is, it usually means one cycle of a prayer. Another surprising tradition in Islam includes the private and verbal temporary marriage contract that is practiced in 12er Shia Islam, otherwise known as nikah mut'ah. According to 12er Shia, preconditions for the mut'ah are that the bride must not be married and she must be Muslim, and at the end of the contract the marriage ends and the wife must undergo iddah, which is a period of abstinence from marriage. The iddah is intended to give paternal certainty to any children should the wife become pregnant during the temporary marriage contract. Generally, the nikah mut'ah has no minimum or maximum duration. Hiddad or mourning is another surprising tradition practiced in Islam. Hiddad for a close relative is said to only last for 3 days, and there are usually guidelines about how the mourning should take place. Weeping is acceptable, but the Islamic faith discourages loud crying and acting out during the mourning period. Conservative Muslims believe that the person's spirit can hear these cries and they cause the spirit anguish. There's a special mourning period for women who have lost a husband, and it's usually called the iddah, and it lasts 4 months and 10 days. During that time, the woman is not allowed to wear perfume or jewelry, and she can only leave the house for work and errands. Another surprising Islamic tradition is that of which pertains to Sufism, known as Tasawwuf in the Arabic-speaking world, which is a form of Islamic mysticism that emphasizes introspection and spiritual closeness with God. A surprising practice that Sufism encompasses is that of Sufi whirling, which is a form of physically active meditation which originated among Sufis, which is still practiced by the Sufi dervishes of the Mavlevi order. The Sufis twirl in a continuous motion with both arms outstretched to the sides, with one hand pointed toward the ground and the other pointed toward the sky, symbolizing reaching for the divine. Sufi whirling becomes an ecstatic meditative-like state. This is sought to abandon one's nafs, ego, or personal desires. Another surprising Islamic practice is that using the miswak, which is a teeth-cleaning twig made from the Salvadora persica tree. The use of miswak was strongly recommended by the Prophet Muhammad in several hadith. The miswak is now predominant in Muslim-inhabited areas, and it has recently been revealed that it has numerous benefits, including their antibacterial activity. Another surprising Islamic tradition that also originates from a hadith is the practice of hijama, which is otherwise known as cupping. It is believed that the Prophet Muhammad would be cupped on a regular basis, and has been recommended for other Muslims to engage in this practice as well. The benefits of cupping are also vast, including the removal of toxins within the blood. Studies have shown cupping to be beneficial in the treatment of migraines, fertility, and joint pain. Another surprising sunnah that most people do not know about pertains to sleep. In Islamic culture, sleeping on the right side, especially in the early stage of sleep, is recommended according to the teachings of Prophet Muhammad. It is stated in the hadith that the Prophet puts his right hand under his cheek when he wants to go to sleep. The last but not least surprising Islamic tradition is that of exorcism, which is commonly recognized to be a part of Christian practice and the like, but not Islam. However, exorcism does exist and is done to summon jinns and demons by invoking the names of God, and is also thought to repair damage believed to be caused by jinn possession or witchcraft of the evil eye.